Guys, it's a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We'll keep it really simple at the start, individually, if you will. How are you doing at the moment?
Very, very well, actually. We're just finishing. Well, we just got our new album through to listen to for test pressing, so we're into the last stages of it till we send it off to be actually printed up. So yeah, it's been a long process, but we're there.
Yeah, I mean that for me is the least pleasant process of it because I hate hearing what we've done when we're about to send it off, and it's when it's too late to make any changes. That's kind of okay, but when it's really inconvenient to make changes but not yet too late, that's quite stressful for me because I really don't want to hear anything that we don't want to hear. So it's kind of listening with my hands over my ears, and screaming to block out all the sounds coming from the speakers. Apart from that, fine. Yeah.
What what an incredible problem to have. I love that. Not quite far enough along that you can't change anything, but yeah, you still don't want to hear any of that. I mean, do you find yourself being your own biggest critic? That regardless of
yeah,
you know,
absolutely. I was saying to Malcolm, I mean, once this is done and we got the CDs in our hand physically, I'll probably give it about a month until I actually start listening to it as an album again and enjoying it.
you've reached that stage then where you just not that you're sick of it, that's the wrong kind of term, but
No,
I guess it's
never
the one
sick
that
of it. No,
works.
it's just ear fatigue, I think.
And for me, fear, just that thing of not wanting to hear something that you then think, oh no, I can't send it out like that, and I'd never previously noticed.
Yeah.
And every time you hear something when you're really analytically listening, you hear something differently.
Yeah.
So we, particularly I think as a vocalist who's also producing themselves, hearing your own voice, I think we underestimate the amount of noise and clicks that you get in ordinary voice, speech and singing, unless you're actually listening out for it. And so at this stage, we've been having weeks of listening out and trying to get rid of little clicks, but then I've become so focused on that bit of frequency that now when I listen to audiobooks for the next few weeks, it's like, how did you put that out? It just sounds like you're spitting at me the whole time, and it's purely because I'm just so focused on that bit of the frequency. I'm completely ignoring the story and instead just hearing the hearing the saliva, and it's quite off-putting, really.
The aspects of being a creative that people don't get to hear enough about or purposely ignore because it's all so horrible.
I mean, I'm not looking for sympathy. It's our own fault for doing this kind of thing. Nobody makes us. I'm not complaining, but it's just it's a weird time when you realise how much of what you sense in the world around you, in the universe you create inside your brain, is so affected by where your focus goes. And for us in that particular bit, it's a tiny bit of audio, but whatever world you live in is so affected by where you put your focus.
Okay, well, January's been and gone. The year is underway, and February, well, we're in the first week of it. So just focusing on events around you right now, 2025, strong start to the year. Do you feel it's treated you well? You excited about what's been going on?
For us as a band, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
basically, yes.
Definitely. This final straight of getting all the artwork done and seeing everything, come to a completeness, as it were. It's always the most exciting part of the project, and then sending those first copies out to podcasters and reviewers and things, and waiting to hear their reactions back, and hearing the singles played on the radio as well, and on shows like like yourselves. That's always quite gratifying. So yeah, absolutely, should be a good year 2025 for us, I think, as a band.
Obviously, in the build period towards an album release, there's a lot going on. Daily, there's always going to be something you have to do. This particular point in time, where we're sitting and talking right now and everything around this particular week, what's keeping you busy right now?
So we're doing a lot of interviews over the next few days.
Cool.
And we very much appreciate the support of all the shows and the podcasts that have invited us to burble on about our stuff.
We've got a launch gig to plan at some point. We've got
when we write the songs, we probably should think a bit about at the time how we're going to play them, because then when it then comes to it for our live performances, any twiddly bits, any solo bits, we want to be actually playing live. For example, if there's a keyboard solo and we don't have access to a keyboard for that show, then I'll try and do something vaguely similar on the guitar, rather than leaving it in a backing track. But yeah, then for the next few weeks we'll be thinking, why did we put that in? That twiddly bit is way beyond what I can reliably play live, because there's a difference between what you can cobble together in a recording where you've got multiple takes, and actually being able to reliably do something vaguely similar live. Although with the Adrenaline live performance, then I find there are some things that I can do live that I've really struggled.
That's true, actually. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the superhero bit takes over when you're on stage, and it's like, how did I manage to play that riff? I couldn't play that when I recorded it, let alone But yeah, so at the moment, interviews we're doing. Be nice to get some more photos done at some point.
Yeah, we've been doing some photo shoot stuff.
That'd be cool. We've got distributors asking us about copies already, so we're getting those lined up as well.
And then pretty soon we'll be doing the most glamorous part of the role, which is stuffing envelopes.
Stuffing envelopes, yay!
This is for obscure independent bands, that kind of thing is actually quite a substantial part of the role, and the actual stuff like this
songwriting
and playing, the bits that are more maybe
the admin side.
Admin.
Yeah. But every envelope stuffed is someone who's spent their hard-earned money on us. So we don't sit there bemoaning the fact we're
very grateful for it all. But yeah, I think sometimes what somebody sees going on stage is like an icing on the cake of a lot of admin.
Yeah. Being a band these days, you have to be your own video director, artistic director, art worker, producer,
social media manager.
A lot of different hats these days as a musician. You're not just doing one thing,
No, of course, there's an incredible amount of work that goes into it, particularly when you are an independent band. And I don't think it's a secret as much as it used to be. Maybe not to the level that it needs to be more appreciated. But as, for example, us talking here, you're not alone. I speak to many other bands as well who are doing everything themselves in a way, not just when it comes to, say, stuffing envelopes and all that, but even online, the social media side of things. You're doing it all yourself. And I think people are more and more aware of that now, and hopefully appreciative. Because ultimately, right, stuffing envelopes, while you say it's a laborious task, and while it is fantastic and all that, ideally, we all want you to have more envelopes than ever to stuff. That's the most positive thing that can come from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a mountain of envelopes is a good thing to have, And there's so much music out there. There's so much good music out there, and there's so many great bands out there that if anyone's taken the time and the money just to, bring a bit onto our side, that's fantastic. Always appreciated.
So we are building to the release of your new album, The Uncertainty Principle, your 8th album, in fact. A Bandcamp release of March 4th, 2025, and a general release of May 30th, 2025. So
I'm glad you got those dates. That's good.
I'd love you to sum up what...
remembering dates. So,
no worries. It's all easy to copy and paste stuff like that. Sum up what this album says about Hats Off Gentlemen Is Adequate at this stage of your careers.
To some extent, it's a continuation of some of the themes we've been exploring over the last several albums of the importance of recognizing our own cognitive vulnerabilities. This one, we previously had our album, The Confidence Trick, about overconfidence. This one is about certainty and uncertainty, and it uses the history of quantum physics. So the uncertainty principle, the idea that the more you understand about one aspect of a particle, the less precisely you can know another aspect of it. And that's not because the instrumentation is failing, but because fundamentally at a small scale, the universe is uncertain and unpredictable. It's using that as a kind of analogy for interpersonal and geopolitical issues. So as science started to understand that reality was inherently uncertain, psychology, we also started to realize that our understanding of ourselves and of each other is inherently uncertain. We tend to assume we know what's going on in somebody else's head with much more certainty than we should. And I think also politically, we can see how being certain that we are right and not pausing to think, why might I be wrong, can lead to appalling atrocities. So that's the overall theme of the album. So it follows various historical incidences, either in the development of the uncertainty principle or some of the historical real characters where they've had interactions that involved uncertainty. And then eventually the album ends with the statement, I might be wrong. So I think we tend to have an opinion and then look for evidence that agrees with us to prove we're right.
It's a very brave thing to actually say, look, I don't know the answers to everything. I'm not completely sure about this. I don't actually know.
I think life would be a lot better if more people were willing to question whether their assumptions are correct. It's very easy to assume that other people are too certain, but to actually do that for your own assumptions and beliefs is much less common, which is why I framed it at the end as I might be wrong, just as much as anybody else might be.
But still without a degree of confidence, you're not specifically stating that you are wrong, it's just that you might be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, even like with things like disaster planning, if you look at, yes, here are the reasons why everything's going to be great. Well, that's lovely, and that confidence might lead to things happening, but it's also good to say what might go wrong, where might my assumptions be faulty, and you look at almost any kind of public project, like infrastructure or anything. It's there's never enough planning for things going wrong.
Yeah, unseen. Yeah.
It is an incredibly vast idea to draw from. So I've got to go back a bit. Let's go back to the earliest point, really, the spark that started this album journey. In the early stages, well, firstly, what was the spark, so to speak, that birthed this album, and how clear was your vision?
Possibly the incident where so Heisenberg was the German physicist who developed the uncertainty principle, one of the founding figures in quantum physics, but he was also later on the head of the German nuclear research project during the Second World War. His former friend and mentor Niels Bohr was in occupied Copenhagen, and I'd been reading about that era and about Heisenberg and his involvement with the German nuclear project, and there was what I thought was a key incident where they had a meeting in Copenhagen, and there's debate about was Heisenberg trying to get his friend's absolution for what he was doing? Was he trying to get his help in developing a Nazi nuclear bomb, or was he trying to get information to the Allies via Bohr? And with the complication that both of them may have known that either or both of them was highly likely to be under surveillance at the time. So everything that they said in this conversation could be interpreted in different ways by either or both participants. They disagreed later on about what had happened at this meeting, and they fell out. That was the topic of a famous play on that topic, Copenhagen, and there was a film made of it as well, and it just really resonated with me, that uncertainty being such a key feature of that meeting with the two people who'd done so much to bring uncertainty into science. Science had previously, I think, assumed that the better you get with your technology, the closer you'll be able to get to describing underlying reality, that you'll be able to get more and more precise. You can measure things better. But this was a huge transformation in the philosophy of science, to think that at a certain scale, the more you understand, the more clearly you can see one aspect, the more blurred things become about another aspect of that particle. That at a fundamental level, the universe is built on uncertainty and on unpredictable foundations. You can predict on an aggregate scale if you've got millions of particles, but for an individual particle, it's fuzzy and fluffy and confusing and not intuitive. And then, although these people understood that in terms of the science or the physics, actually when it came to an interpersonal issue, not understanding what the other person was intending or disagreeing about their intentions, that uncertainty, is still so dominant in our lives, even for people who were such experts on it in one area in physics.
The irony is huge, isn't it?
Yeah. And I do realize that, the uncertainty principle in physics is a very technical, specific thing about very small scale phenomena. I'm not saying it is a quantum physics thing when we're talking about people disagreeing in life, but it's, I think, an interesting metaphor or analogy. So 20th century sort of philosophy of science, I think, in several areas, maths, physics, psychology, increasingly understanding that things are uncertain. That's just how they are. So that's kind of that. There was that little story that I think was the spark for it.
How does that blossom though? I mean, because ultimately that's still that you might have that specific story and that specific event, but that's going to blossom into a full album, a full, like the taking that concept and growing it, so to speak. At what stage did you start to see that becoming more than perhaps you initially intended?
You were reading a lot of books though about the subject anyway, weren't you?
So I did a lot of reading. Well, I tend to listen mostly on audiobooks. But reading and listening about history of science in that kind of period, about 1910 or to 1945 or so. And then when I'm listening, sometimes I'll hear phrases, parts of sentences, a couple of words together. That feels lyrical, or that feels like a melodic shape.
Yeah.
And then start to pull together phrases, ideas into.
That's the point. You start to send me stuff, isn't
words,
it? Yeah. So Malcolm will send me ideas over. But well, I've got this idea for the album. So here's the overarching big idea. And then I've got these riffs or these tunes so far. This one I think could be about this character. Oh, I've heard about this though. Have you read this story? This is about so and so. And so, again, it's not a concept album as such, is it?
It doesn't directly follow one storyline through.
But each song has something relating to aspects of uncertainty within it.
Yeah, and the whole album works through chronologically. So all the historically inspired songs are in chronological order going through the album.
Yeah.
So it wasn't so much that you approached it with like a massive degree of confidence, e.g. that you knew, particularly when we're talking about historical events, that you knew perhaps every single story you had to do research. Yeah. How deep down those rabbit holes did you go?
I'd say I go deep enough to say I'm an interested amateur enthusiast with an interest in these historical things, but without claiming to be an expert. I'm not a professional historian. I am inspired by true historical stories.
It's also things that grab you emotionally as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So some things might be of great interest, but I just don't see a way of making them into a song. So you're wanting. Well, I'm looking for. Sorry, let me say that. I may have a theme or a story that I'm interested in, but what I'm looking for is a sort of an emotional entry point for a song. So a lot of the songs we sing will be from the point of view of a character. And there are certain things that are easier to sing as a character. So so the album does not go into the maths of quantum physics, which I think I wouldn't understand well enough and would be quite difficult to pull off lyrically. But interpersonal dynamics between characters that were involved in that historical narrative, that's a much easier, I think, jumping off point for a song. So I want something when I'm singing it to have an emotional resonance, or at least for me to feel something authentic. That seems
absolutely, yeah. I mean, like say the title track, for instance, the Uncertainty Principle, the title track. It's about what's the guy's name?
Mo
Berg, who was he a American baseball
player
in the sort of 40s, who was recruited as a spy. So, and you're singing the song from his viewpoint, aren't you?
So
give
so to me it's a very strange story that a professional baseball player is chosen by the American Secret Services as the person to go and investigate whether or not the Nazis were close to developing a nuclear bomb. I presume their nuclear specialists were busy making the American one, and so not available to be. And also, presumably, you wouldn't want somebody who knew an awful lot about that to be potentially captured.
No.
Anyway, fair.
So he's sent off. He goes round.
Goes swanning around Europe.
Spending a lot of time and money in expensive hotels and restaurants.
Yeah, he was living the high life. He was
finding scientists to talk to find out, how close they were to developing a nuclear bomb, which it turns out not particularly close. And then he was sent to a lecture in Zurich, being given by Heisenberg, who was the head of the Nazi bomb Nazi nuclear program. And I also find it mystifying why the Germans would allow the person who's this very senior figure in their potential war machine to go and do a public lecture with apparently no obvious security. So the baseball player is able to go into this lecture with a gun in his pocket with the mission of listening to his lecture, deciding whether he thinks Heisenberg's close to developing a nuclear weapon, and then to assassinate him or not.
There's definitely a song in there somewhere, isn't there?
Tell me about it.
And so the idea is, the perspective, the narrator type perspective for that song is.
As far as I know, you've never been a baseball American spy person, have you?
I've very little interest in baseball.
Yeah, and spying.
Well, I think that's quite interesting, but I'm not a spy.
But but you can put himself.
So I just imagine this somewhat bemused person sitting in a lecture about quantum physics, which isn't the most easy subject to engage with if you're not involved in that area, and trying to work out from that whether or not he was supposed to make a nuclear bomb, as if they were expecting him to suddenly go and give a public lecture saying, "Oh, this is how we're going to make our nuclear bomb." It seems bizarre, but he's sent there and so he's got this life and death decision to make on the basis of very incomplete information. So that, in terms of decision making under in the conditions of uncertainty, is one of the themes that comes up in several of these stories.
I'm really glad you went into depth with that particular song and that particular story, because ultimately it's things like that that makes this album and your music more accessible. Because on face value, to someone say who does not know you and is just learning about you, quantum physics, interpersonal uncertainty, these aren't for everyone, so they can almost be off-putting to a degree. But then to
Yeah.
understand and hear that you have the accessible stories that are historical and telling interesting, exciting ways,
Yeah.
that's really, really cool. Did you have any issues as you're working on this album and creating the music and writing the songs and telling the stories? Did you have any challenges where you struggled to make it accessible and relevant to modern times?
In terms of the relevance, the dangers of people in power being very certain of their pre-existing beliefs, I don't think is any less of a problem than it has been in the past.
However many years, yeah.
Yeah, it's an ongoing problem that people ask themselves. How am I right? You know, proving that I'm right, looking for evidence that supports their existing beliefs, rather than why might I be wrong? And that's why the album ends with the.
You can listen to the songs though as just songs. You haven't got to delve too deep. You haven't got to do your homework to enjoy them. Let's put it that way. Yeah, you can just listen to the songs, and Malcolm's lyrics are accessible to all as well. Would that be true?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, certainly what we hope is that if somebody wants to just enjoy the song as a song and have no interest or whatever in what inspired the song, that's absolutely fine. And if somebody is interested and wants to go into whatever level of depth into the background, that's also fine. I think for me, having a theme for an album is really helpful for the process of creating it and to give the album its shape and flow. But if it's not necessary for whether somebody engages with the album or not, that's entirely up to them. Where if somebody wants to have our music on shuffle in whatever playlist, that's that. You know, we're perfectly happy with that. It's not a problem.
They're listening. That is still the most important thing.
We're very grateful for anybody who takes the time to listen. Yeah.
Did you at any stage of the album creation process find yourself in a state of uncertainty about what you were doing here?
Yeah. We particularly as that stage where we're listening through the masters and oh no, is that a click? Is that a crackle? Is that distortion? And we listen again. Oh, it sounds completely different.
Having done this, 7 times before, we know there's going to be sort of certain peaks and troughs during the process, and those early stages of Malcolm sending me through the music and me going, right, what can I do with this? How can I add to this? I mean, that's the one of the best feelings you can get. It's a fantastic feeling. But at some point you're going to be sitting listening to 4 bars over and over and over again to see if that thing, that thing is that clicks there or whatever. So and we do this every single time.
That's why deadlines are really helpful.
Yeah, deadline. Yes, yeah. Otherwise, you could never finish anything. Yeah.
But yeah,
well, they're saying that
deadlines, and that helps us churn. Because Mark likes, I think, a lot of the detail side of things, and I do work on the detail a lot. But the thing I enjoy most, I suppose, is creating new things.
Yeah.
So I'm at this stage in the process. I'm itching to be like doing the album after next, and we've still got. Plenty of time. I'm trying to be disciplined and hold off from sending Mark loads of new songs for future albums. But that's my fun bit. That's my comfort zone, I suppose.
We do have folders full of ideas for album number 9 sitting there already that will be looked at some point in the not too distant future, no doubt.
I would have been surprised if you said anything but that. Creatives, you're always learning, you're always progressing. Ideally, every day, every week, every month, you learn or discover something new that inspires you, right?
I think we're progressing as well. I think every album's getting stronger, and I mean that in kind of. This has got more. It's a bit deeper. It's a bit. It's got more subtlety to it. I think Malcolm's writing some of the best lyrics he's ever written for this album, quite frankly. So yeah, I do think we move a step forward each time we do a new one.
Well, there's been a pretty positive response to One World That Means the World in Copenhagen so far. Has that response that you've seen, the positive response, helped kind of ease your mind regarding how you think maybe the full album might be received?
I think so personally. I mean, it does sort of put my mind at rest a little bit. I mean, what do you think, Malk? But giving positive feedback is always it's just a lovely thing, you know. Especially if it resonates with people as well.
I was just thinking how on the day that we clicked send for the stuff going off to all the online things, just an hour or so before we were due to do that, had that review come through. So, a review came through of an old album that just suddenly came up on my feed saying some of the worst guitar playing they've ever heard. Okay, that's
yeah, that was bad timing.
And in terms of then trying to keep up some degree of self-confidence to then click send and not go back and like, oh, do I need to change this? But you put something out in the public space, and
it's not yours. After you've hit the send button, it's not yours anymore. It's other people's.
People are perfectly entitled to comment as they wish. Different people have different tastes. That's fine. I don't really complain about reviews in that sense. I think that's absolutely fine. But just in terms of for that moment of when you're asking about self-confidence, I'd say I'm not a very self-confident person. On stage, I think I look quite self-confident, but I certainly don't feel it in anything really.
That's part of the on-stage character, so to speak. While you are real, authentic people, and you're up there, and you're doing everything that you do on the record. It's that reality. It's still almost a character, so to speak. You have to play the role of rock star.
Mm.
Oh yeah, that's a much more fun self to be than this kind of self you have to be the rest of the time. Yeah, enjoy that.
And last, not that I want to sort of give a review, a negative review airtime, but the poor choice of words of the worst guitar playing they've ever heard. That's just poor, because ultimately it might not be for you and it may not be to your taste, but there's a better way to word it than that without be, because that's obviously an egregious. Well, let's be honest, it's bollocks, because you can play the guitar, so clearly it's not the worst.
Well, I
if I played the guitar, then it might be valid. Yeah.
I certainly didn't intend it to be as a thing of fishing for compliments. It's just an example of these self-confidence, and when you were saying about how that as you're going in this process, do you get moments of doubt? Yeah, I mean, but it certainly is helpful getting positive feedback, but you don't want to be too dependent on that.
No,
because then you also don't want to be too put off by negative stuff. I think from my point of view, if there are some people for whom what we are doing is something they want to spend their time engaging with, then that's a valid reason. That's a very good reason to keep pushing yourself to do it.
Yeah.
And if there are other people who are completely not interested, that's absolutely fine. There's vast amounts of different ways that people can spend their time, and for most of those activities, I have no issue with it, and I don't expect everybody to want to enjoy our stuff. That's fine. But if there's some people who do, then that feels to us a good reason to keep doing what we do.
Well, on that front then, what do you hope listeners take away from this album? But in particular, I want you to think about those people who may be hearing you for the first time.
Oh, that's a good question. That's a very good question.
I'd like them to take away that it's not the worst guitar player. sorry. No.
I'd like them to appreciate maybe the breadth of influences we have and the kind of the range of different musical styles we do. I hope that becomes apparent when they listen to it. A lot of thought goes into the production of stuff, and the note choices and kind of sound choices and where we place things and that sort of thing. I don't know, really.
And I suppose for me, if somebody came away and thinking, yes, okay, there's lots of different styles that we go through, but there's still a sense of unifying voice underneath. I don't mean vocal voice, but compositionally, there's something that holds it all together, and that if they would be interested in hearing some of the other stuff we do, and were interested enough to then have a listen, that would be, to me, a huge success.
Enough. When you both then look back at the entire album creation process, so from the very, very first moment to, well, where you're at now, what are some of your individual favorite memories of it?
Well, as I said, every single album is when I get a new song land in my inbox, and it's that first time of hearing something brand new, and then me deciding how can I add to this? What can I bring to this party? Hearing new music that you're then going to be working on and kind of add to is just it's one of the best feelings you can have, really. That's always my favorite aspect to it. I really enjoy, actually, last couple of albums we sort of have some vocal sessions where we'll put a couple of days aside, and then we'll go and sort of hang out and we'll do, let's just like vocals. So I've been sort of more engineering and producing your vocals.
I prefer that,
and that's a really good fun process as well. And actually hearing Malcolm for the first time put that top line on a song, because most of the time I'm just getting the melody of the song is there and the chords, but I'm not hearing the actual where the vocals are going to go. And so hearing that for the first time on the vocal songs, because some of our stuff is instrumental, that's always a highlight for me as well. And me going, oh, I didn't imagine it that way, but because in your head you're kind of singing melodies to yourself how you think it's going to go. That's always a highlight. What highlights do you have?
For me, you get certain moments where like bits of a jigsaw suddenly click together. So you're going from little ideas to something that becomes more of a cohesive whole, and it sometimes feels like it's a sudden realization. So sometimes it might be a lyrical idea that then brings something together, or it might be something in the harmonies, or it might be slightly changing a drum part. Just those moments where it's like, that's what I'm going for. Yeah. And where it suddenly changes things. I suppose those kind of.
That's also true of the album as well. When the album starts to feel like an album and not just a collection of songs that we've been working on. So how it's been sequenced, and when it feels like a cohesive thing, that's always a big step, actually.
Do you remember the specific point where the uncertainty principle became like that, when it became an album, when you felt that moment, oh, we've got an album here?
Oh, not sure really. It is an interesting point though. When you go from something being just a kind of an idea in your own head, and then somehow it gets to being a thing that's out there, and like a CD, or it's on the streaming service. And it is odd, that thing of going from being inside your brain to then somehow becoming a thing. It's a bit odd.
I think the title, once the title track was gone, coming back to that title track, because it's the longest piece on this album. How long is it? It's about 7-8 minutes long, and goes through different kind of musical styles and different scenes. It's almost like being in a film. It's very, very filmic, the way it's written. Hearing that placed in the great scheme of things was the point that I felt the album was going to hang off that song.
Right.
So it's the centerpiece of the album. I think it's track 6 on the album.
Yeah, it kind of.
So it's that kind of. I've always thought some of the best albums are, track 7 on the album is always the best track. This one's track 6. And everything else can fit around that. And so we've got our sort of linchpin moment, as you want to call it, or kingpin moment. That's always quite gratifying.
And another highlight for me, I suppose, is sometimes I'm drafting something, and it may have quite a lot of contemporary classical elements as well as the rock side, and I send it to Mark. And I can imagine a lot of people might be just thinking it just sounds wrong, having the atonal elements in amongst
rubbing up against the rock stuff,
standard rock tonalities. And so with both of us, one of our favorite tracks on the album is the Ultraviolet Catastrophe, which is a instrumental which jumps between standard kind of major minor tonality and more atonal contemporary classical elements. And actually, when Mark going back to that, I really like that. It's like, good. I'm going. I feel that validated in doing something that's a bit more experimental.
Yeah, outside the box a bit more. Yeah.
It's incredible to hear you talk about this album in such a positive light. Clearly, you're very encouraged and excited by what you've created here and what it means for your future, particularly as while it is releasing in March on Bandcamp, it's not the only exciting thing coming up. We have the launch event at the Camden Club on Sunday, the 6th of April, 2025, 1 p.m. The event promoted by London Prog Gigs, jointly headlined by you and Ghost of the Machine, who are also celebrating their new album.
Yes. And they're first time to London as well. They've never been to London before.
And they're lovely.
Yeah. That's great guys. Lovely guys.
So I take it you're very excited for that show. And what for those who've never experienced you in the live environment, what can we expect?
Me jumping around and sweating lots. It's generally what happens.
So it's our live shows are usually the two of us plus a laptop, which sounds in theory awful, but actually really works for us. We are very enthusiastic performers, I'd say, energetic, engaged, and
I mean, my playing history was coming from a series of metal bands and kind of like hard rock bands. And so I was proper heads down, giving it all. And I still go on the stage and play that way. I do play every note like it's my last thing I'm ever going to do. I can't just stand there and just play the bass. So I'm quite active on stage and energetic. And we have, because we're really good friends as well, we have a really good chemistry with each other as well on stage. And it's quite playful.
Yeah.
So you're having fun.
Yeah, we are having fun.
Usually on quite serious topics, but we are not very serious about ourselves.
Yeah.
So on stage, lots of self-deprecating comments. Very playful and very passionate in terms of the performing style.
Yeah. Have you talked? Are you plan? What are we doing track listing wise? Are we doing the album in full?
Not quite, but there's quite a few. On most of our albums, there's maybe been, say, 3 or 4 tracks that are realistically giggable type ones. This one, there's a lot more. And it wasn't a deliberately planned thing. It's just how it ended up that quite a few of the tracks.
I mean, Copenhagen's been played out live already. One Word That Means the World's been played out live already.
And Certainty and Between Two Worlds. And we've got several others. So we can
really take from it.
Probably not far off an hour's worth of stuff that we can do live from there. So it's virtually the whole album we can do live. Yeah.
That's fabulous. Can't wait. We're looking forward to that show. Unique event, and I'm really excited for it. But as well, of course, the Uncertainty Principle Bandcamp release March 4th, 2025, and general release May 30th, 2025. Malcolm, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
very much for all your support.
Very much appreciated. Cheers.
Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. It does help us out. You can find us at gbhbl.com and across all social media platforms. And if you really want to give us a bit of extra support, please consider buying us a cup of coffee over on our coffee page. Thank you.